New company commander requires soldiers to wear ties with civilian clothing while on tour. I was in a US Army band stationed in Germany in the early 90s. We performed a lot of concerts and events for the public all over the region, usually traveling by bus. Normally we would wear civilian clothing while traveling, then change into a formal military uniform after we arrived, unpacked, and set up for the event. Our normal requirement for civilian clothing was pretty informal, similar to what you might wear in an office in the US. Men had to wear a shirt with a collar, so lots of us wore polo shirts. Jeans were acceptable as long as they were clean and no holes, no hat, etc. I had been there about 6 months when we got a new company commander. In the band, the commander is a warrant officer, and also conducts the band, runs rehearsals, picks music, all that fun stuff. He had been with the unit about 2 weeks, and went along with us on a short 2-3 day to play some concerts for German civilians. When we returned, he started making changes. Most were pretty minor and expected, like what music would be performed. But the biggest change was to our travel dress code. All male soldiers would be required to wear a tie when on tour. Never mind that many of these kids were rather young and didn't even own one, other than the flat black tie issued with our Class A uniforms. The next trip was only a few days away, and we had better show up ready to go with ties on. And that's when me and my roommate decided to have a little fun. We went to the local thrift shop and bought up all the ugly ties we could find. Paisley ties, Christmas ties, ties with Hawaiian hula girls on them, thin neon-colored 80s ties, super wide 70s ties, even a few plaid bow ties. Over the next few days, we handed them out to nearly every person in the unit, including a few women who wanted to get in on the fun. Tour departure day arrives, and we have our morning formation in the band hall, all standing in rows, dressed and ready to depart, new ties worn. The first sergeant is wearing a lovely hula girl tie, and grins a bit as he goes over all the usual formalities. Everyone present, all equipment ready to go, last minute instructions, blah blah blah, then calls the company commander in. The new commander steps inside the band hall and freezes. He looks slowly down the lines of soldiers, biting his lip like he's trying very hard not to say something. He backs out of the room, still not saying a word. About a minute later, he returns, looks right at the first sergeant, and says, "Everything ready to go?" "Yes, sir." "Right. Let's hit it." The two went off without any problems, but the requirement to wear ties was dropped as soon as we got back. Some of us still wore them occasionally for fun. That reminds me of one of my jobs as an engineer, tech. One event was in a concert hall with very formal audience. I think it was a political party event. After setting up lights and sound, we had a few hours break because its start was delayed, the tables and chairs were not set up yet, etc. So we went to lunch, took our time. After maybe 2 hours we got back and wanted to get back in. Front entrance, the back was closed because of a construction on the building and road. To our surprise, the political party's security wouldn't let us in, even when we proved it couldn't even start. We were told they had strict order and we could only enter with a white shirt and a black tie, black pants. End of discussion. We looked puzzled at each other. We were in working white t-shirts and grey cargo pants, tool belt and safety boots. One colleague tried to call the event manager, of course. He didn't pick up. Two tried to tell the security without us there would be no event and so on. All was in vain. After a while, I got an idea and went into malicious compliance. "Guys, I've got a great idea. They want formal attire? They will get what they want. But not like they think they will get." We put my plan into action and after around 20-30 minutes gathered back in front of the security who couldn't believe what they saw. We, in all glory, stood there with black duct tape all over our cargo pants, making noise with every step, our white t-shirts, and nicely cut ties, of course, out of black duct tape too. Draped over the shirts, a tux-like jacket, out of duct tape. The security was speechless and didn't stop us, clearly unable to grasp what happened. We went slowly and smugly grinning through them. They were completely defeated. We won. Nice malicious compliance. We're not done. When we were in the foyer, We met, perchance, the busy event manager. He glanced at us, turned back, opening his mouth to continue talking to the head of catering, turning his head slowly back to us, realizing who we were, and all color drained from his head, his mouth gaping open in disbelief. It took him a good minute to get his expression back to more believable human forms, the face getting red and redder. He ordered us to start, but to remove the ridiculous masquerade first, which we did, still in plain sight of the security, which were visibly uncomfortable. While removing the duct tape, the better part of our just 2 days ago opened tape supply crate, the event manager screamed at the security. We couldn't hear either, the manager turning into more and more age with inhumane, incomprehensible screeches, the security too meek to understand under the tape removing noise, every one of them visibly shrinking every few seconds. Victory. Ah, great malicious compliance, I love you, the goddess of my existence. But, wait. We're not done yet. When we told our boss what happened, he laughed and laughed, for half an hour straight. But then he got quiet, said cunningly, they will pay for that. And he meant that literally. He ordered not the usual half-year supply crate of tape, he ordered 2 pallets of it, put it on the invoice. I might have or maybe not seen him altering the price of the single tape roll. He smirked and said in a dry tone, a whole tax. Staff Sergeant instructs shaven-headed troops to put on a hat for civilian flight. OCM. I wasn't involved in this particular act, but had it recounted to me by an old-time friend. We were discussing some bad bosses we had serving in the army, and my pal was telling me about his boss that I only knew by name and reputation. The brief outline is that back in the 1980s, British troops would sometimes fly out to Belize for jungle training on civilian flights. The minimum dress standard was collar and tie. What typically happened was a load of blokes in cheap suits would get bussed from the barracks to the airport and invariably head straight for the bars to get wankered before the flight. The grown-ups were always concerned about bad behavior and the fact that potentially it could portray the army in a bad light if there was any drunkenness or shenanigans. The day before departure, one of the troops, platoons, had all shaved their heads completely into the wood. Totally bald. Short and trimmed is acceptable, totally bald is a big no-no. This came to light when they turned up for a light PT session 24 hours before departure. The 40-ish guys were stood in assorted civilian PT kit to find that the troop staff sergeant went totally apoplectic when he saw them, ranting and raving that they looked like fucking skinhead hooligans and that they were an embarrassment, etc. The troop staff sergeant then made the glorious decision of instructing the men that rather than fucking embarrassing him going through the airport like a gang of skinheads, they would all have to wear a hat. Not so clever now, are you? Yes, they were. And that is where the malicious compliance came in. Next day the ragtag shower of blokes, corporals and below, dressed in cheap nylon suits and stay-pressed trousers, met up outside the living accommodation to march round to the squadron offices where the rest of the squadron was waiting for the coaches to arrive. As they turned the corner, the whole camp fell apart laughing as the scruffiest cheap shoes, cheap suit wearing the body of men never assembled turned up in 3 ranks, marching in perfect step, wearing sombreros, Stetsons, full-face balaclavas, flat caps, woolly hats, bowler hats, top hats and deer stalkers. And collar and tie, obviously. It was here that the squadron sergeant major stepped in and the guys were told to take the headwear off. Troops 1, Troop Staff Sergeant 0. Years later the Troop Staff Sergeant went on to be a regimental sergeant major, and I'd like to think he tells this story from his perspective too.